Honor belongs to living veterans, not bronze statues. The voice cut through the heavy silence like a slap, smooth, well-fed, brimming with smugness and authority. It came from just behind Ivan Petrovich Gordaev, and though it wasn't loud, it rang like a gunshot across the sun-baked parade ground. Ivan didn't flinch from fear, but from disgust. The July sun over the southern military district was merciless. It showed no favoritism. Not to the cadets locked into formation like toy soldiers, not to the officers sweating beneath polished caps, not even the weathered veterans standing in the front row of honored guests. The heat turned the asphalt into a griddle, distorting the outlines of the platform and the flag bearers with waves of shimmering air. The scent of dust, sweat, and scorched brass filled every breath. The ceremony was nearly over. Speeches had been made, medals handed out. All that remained was a final act, the ceremonial march past. Ivan Petrovich stood like an oak, unmoving. His back was straight, as in his youth. The simple wooden cane in his hand wasn't weakness. It was a statement, a staff of pride, not pity. His old-style uniform bore faded but unmistakable signs of valor. 2 orders of the Red Star, an Order of Courage, medals for bravery, and for military merit. Each decoration, a memory carved in metal. To some, he was a relic. To most, a legend. Young lieutenants saluted with awe. Even colonels approached him with respect. His name graced patriotic clubs, school walls, even a street back home. He had earned all of it, not with words, but with blood. And now, walking past the veterans' row, came the district commander himself, Lieutenant General Ruzikov, broad-shouldered, expensively groomed, with the easy confidence of a man used to being obeyed. His chest was weighted with new, glossy medals. His eyes scanned the crowd like a man assessing property. He paused, right in front of Ivan. The other veterans quickly adjusted their posture. Chins up, chests out. One tugged at his cap. Another wiped his brow. Then, with a glance at the nearby monument, the one Ivan had just placed flowers at, Ruzikov smirked and muttered, "Honor belongs to the living, not to bronze statues." It was meant to sound clever, maybe even inspirational, but it landed like spit in the face. Ivan didn't move, didn't blink. He slowly turned his head and met the general's eyes. His gaze, faded in color, but sharp as ever, held no fear, no reverence, only frost, unforgiving, unblinking. Then came the music. The orchestra launched into the march. The command rang out. Cadets began stepping forward, boots pounding in perfect rhythm. The veterans raised their hands in salute. All of them, except one. Ivan kept his hand down, his cane steady, his eyes on Ruzikov. The general noticed. He turned sharply, face reddening, voice tight with disbelief. "Veteran," he barked, "are you deaf?" I said, "Why aren't you saluting?" Silence. The music dimmed around them. A ripple passed through the crowd. Eyes turned. Even the cadets faltered for half a beat. The general took a step closer, rage blooming across his face. "What's wrong, Gordaev? Gone senile? Combat shock 40 years late?" I asked, "Why are you not saluting a superior officer?" Still silence. Then Ivan Petrovich stepped forward. Just one step, but it was enough. His voice, when it came, was low but perfectly clear. It sliced through the tension like a bayonet. "I salute the uniform, not the man who disgraces it." Time froze. The band faltered. Cadets stopped mid-step. Officers turned as if jerked by wires. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Gordaev stood his ground, unmoving, unyielding, and for the first time all day, it was a general who looked away. Alexei Igorevich Sokolov, the commander of their reconnaissance battalion, had his arms draped warmly around the shoulders of 2 young sergeants. One of them, barely 19, clean-shaven, and smiling broadly, would be dead within a week. Ivan closed his eyes. The stifling air of his Rostov apartment vanished, replaced by the dry, dusty wind of the Panjshir Valley. "Petirovich, why the long face?" Sokolov's voice was calm, slightly hoarse, but always carried a fatherly warmth. They sat on the armored hull of a BMP, sharing a canteen of water between them. Ivan, then a young senior lieutenant, silently dug at the rocky ground with the toe of his boot. "It's the losses again, Comrade Lieutenant Colonel. More kids, I just don't get it. What are we fighting for? Sokolov took a sip from the canteen and wiped his sunburned, weathered face. He was only about 10 years older than Ivan, but seemed to carry the wisdom of someone who had lived several lives. You're asking the wrong question, Petrovich, he said, nodding toward the soldiers nearby, cleaning their rifles. We're not fighting for what, we're fighting for who. For them, so they make it home, so their mothers don't get telegrams with black seals. And the orders? Ivan asked quietly. Orders aren't ours to debate. Our job is to carry them out, but to do it in a way that keeps those boys alive. That's what matters in this meat grinder. Staying human, not turning savage, not losing your honor or your soul. Got it, Starship Lieutenant. Ivan had nodded back then, though he hadn't fully understood. The meaning of those words would come later at a terrible cost. Sokolov was exactly that kind of man. He'd give up his last dry ration for a soldier. He'd sit for hours by the bedside of the wounded. In command briefings, he would argue fiercely with the brass, refusing plans he believed would slaughter his men. Staff officers disliked him for his bluntness and stubbornness, but in the battalion, they worshipped him. Behind his back, the soldiers called him father. There was no higher praise. That's why, when a young, polished Captain Ruzakov was sent to battalion to coordinate with headquarters, everyone tensed up immediately. He walked around with a self-important air, quoted from manuals, looked at battle-hardened troops like chess pieces, and above all, he feared dirtying his perfectly pressed uniform. He didn't belong. Then came Operation Girza. The memory slammed into Ivan like a blow. His hands trembled around the old box he held. The smell of sunbaked armor, sweat, and gun oil filled his senses. He was back in that suffocating command tent, staring at the unfolded map on the table. Captain Ruzakov pointed with a baton at a spot in the mountains, speaking confidently. According to intelligence, there's a major Mujahideen supply base here, weapons, ammo. Our objective is to hit fast, destroy it, and capture prisoners. Sokolov Battalion will lead the assault. Flanks are secured by neighboring units. At 12 o'clock, artillery will cut off retreat routes. Simple and effective. Sokolov frowned. He had fought too long in those mountains to believe in anything simple and effective. Is the intel confirmed? He asked, his voice low. That gorge is perfect for an ambush. If they're waiting for us in there, we'll be trapped. Ruzakov smiled condescendingly. No need to overthink, Alexei Igorevich. The intel comes from Army HQ, most reliable source there is. Air support is too risky. Artillery will handle it. You just get to the target. Everything's approved at the highest level. He said the last part with a loaded tone, staring somewhere over Sokolov's head. Careerist, Ivan thought with disgust. Sokolov stared at the map for a long time. Then he looked up and said, Fine, Captain. Orders are orders. But if your artillery is 5 minutes late, no one will be left to file reports about your big career prospects. They entered the gorge under the cover of night. The silence was unnatural. No crickets. No distant howling. The mountains were mute, and that silence was more terrifying than any scream. Sokolov, leading the forward scout group with Ivan, kept halting and listening. But the airwaves were dead. I don't like this, Petrovich, he whispered. Feels like we're walking into a grave. His words proved prophetic. Less than a kilometer from the supposed base, the mountains erupted. Tracer rounds lit the dark. RPGs slammed from the slopes. The lead BMP went up in flames immediately. Hell broke loose. Defensive positions. Return fire. Sokolov's voice roared through the chaos. Radio. I need radio contact with HQ. Ivan, shooting from behind a rock, saw the radio operator frantically working the knobs. Sokol calling Zarya. Sokol to Zarya. We're ambushed. We need fire support on the slopes. I repeat, immediate support needed. Through static and noise came Ruzakov's trembling voice. Zarya receiving. Sokol confirmed position. Over. Damn your coordinates. Sokolov shouted into the mic, Ruzakov, it's me. They're here, they were waiting. Hit them with artillery, now. As planned. Silence. A deadly pause, broken only by explosions and screams. Then, finally, Alexei Igorevich, I can't. HQ won't approve fire. Your troops are too close. Risk of friendly casualties. You must fall back. Sokolov's face twisted with fury. He understood. Fall back? Fall back, were you coward? We have wounded. We're trapped. You promised. Orders to hold until further clarification. Ruzikov said, now in his formal, bureaucratic tone. End of communication. The short beeps on the radio sounded like a death sentence. They had been abandoned. Ruzikov was too afraid to take responsibility. Too scared to report a failed operation. Too scared of mistakes that could ruin his career. Easier to sacrifice an entire battalion. Sokolov hurled the radio aside. Dust and rage covered his face. He looked at Ivan, then at the handful of survivors pinned against rocks. Well, men, he said, help's not coming. We break out on our own. For the motherland, for those who won't rise again. Those were his last words. The next second, a burst from a machine gun hit him square in the chest. He fell into Ivan's arms, whispering, "Get the boys out." Ivan, concussed and bleeding from shoulder and leg wounds, only remembered fragments after that, rage replacing fear, screams of the wounded, his last magazine running dry, then darkness. He woke 2 days later in a field hospital. The first thing he saw wasn't a medic. It was Captain Ruzikov standing by the door, quietly speaking with a senior officer. Ruzikov didn't know Ivan was awake. "A tragic mistake, Comrade Colonel," he was saying softly. Lieutenant Colonel Sokolov acted recklessly, changed the route without approval, entered a zone we hadn't cleared. I tried to stop him over the radio, but he wouldn't listen. In the end, he got those men killed through his stubbornness. I was barely able to coordinate the retreat. Ivan listened, paralyzed with helpless rage. This coward, who had abandoned him to die, was now building his career on the bones of fallen comrades, blaming the one man who had tried to save them, who could no longer defend himself. Ivan tried to stand to speak, but only a weak groan came out. Ruzikov turned. Their eyes met. In Ruzikov's gaze, Ivan saw no shame, no guilt, only cold, calculating fear of exposure, and the steel determination to bury the truth. In that moment, Ivan made a vow. He would survive, no matter what it took. And one day, the truth about Sokolov's heroism and Ruzikov's betrayal would be told, even if it took a lifetime. Ivan Petrovich opened his eyes. Dusk had filled the room. He was still clutching the old photo in his hand. 20 years had passed, an entire lifetime. But now, he had thrown a stone into the swamp, and he would not retreat. For Batya, for the boys left behind in that canyon, for honor, so easily trampled and so painfully hard to cleanse. Pressure was mounting. Early one morning, the first wave of inspections hit his small gym. Fire marshals came first, stern, inflexible, scouring every document, every socket. Then came the tax inspectors, poring over ledgers, asking seemingly meaningless questions. Ivan watched them from outside, through the glass. His face showed no fear, but his eyes betrayed exhaustion and strain. "You should see their faces," muttered Igor, another veteran, standing beside him, like they're inspecting a gang hideout. "We are criminals in their eyes," Ivan replied quietly. But the audits weren't the worst. There were subtler tactics. Old friends stopped coming to the club. Whispers spread. Some were approached, urged to testify against him. "It's for the Army's image," said well-dressed visitors in hushed voices. Some refused, but fear spread like smoke. Ivan knew this was more than pressure. It was a campaign, and he couldn't fight the system alone. Silently, carefully, Ivan reached out for help. He contacted an old friend, Dmitry Viktorovich Kovalyev, a respected independent military journalist known for integrity and deep ties in the defense world. "Dmitry Viktorovich," Ivan said, voice low but steady, "I need your help. I can't do this alone." Alexei Igorevich Sokolov, their reconnaissance battalion commander, had both arms around the shoulders of two young sergeants. One of them, clean-shaven and grinning wide, had just turned 19. A week later, he was gone. Ivan closed his eyes, and the heavy air of his Rostov apartment gave way to the dry, dusty winds of the Panjshir Valley. "Why the long face, Petrovich?" Sokolov's voice was calm, a little hoarse, but always carried a fatherly warmth. They were sitting on the armor of a BMP, sharing a canteen of water. Ivan, then still a young senior lieutenant, absently poked the stony earth with his boot. Just thinking, Comrade Lieutenant Colonel. Ivan muttered. More losses again. More boys. Why are we even fighting? I can't make sense of it. Sokolov took a sip, wiped his sunburnt, weathered face. He wasn't much older than Ivan, maybe 10 years, but he seemed to carry the wisdom of a man who had lived several lives. Wrong question, Petrovich, he said. It's not why. It's for whom. He nodded toward the soldiers cleaning their weapons nearby. We fight for them, so they can go home, so their mothers don't get death notices. Orders? Orders aren't ours to question. Ours is to carry them out in a way that brings our men back alive. He leaned closer. The only thing that matters in this meat grinder is to stay human. Don't turn into a beast. Don't lose your honor or your conscience. Understand, Starley? Ivan had nodded, but he didn't fully understand then. That came later at a terrible price. Sokolov lived by those words. He would give his dry ration to a hungry soldier, sit for hours at the bedside of a wounded man, and argue himself hoarse with command staff when he believed their plans meant certain death for his people. He wasn't liked in headquarters, too blunt, too stubborn. But in the battalion, he was worshipped. The soldiers called him father, behind his back, the highest honor, which is why, when HQ sent in a young, polished captain named Ruzakov to coordinate with the battalion, everyone tensed. Ruzakov strutted like a peacock, tossing around textbook phrases, treating battle-hardened men like chess pieces, and seemed most terrified of getting dust on his perfectly ironed uniform. He didn't belong. And then came Operation Gyrza. The memory hit Ivan like a punch. His hands trembled. The scent of sun-baked armor, sweat, and gun oil filled his nose. He was back in the command tent, stifling heat pressing down. A map lay on the table. Captain Ruzakov pointed at a spot in the mountain range with a pointer. According to Recon, here's a major mujahideen supply point, weapons ammo. Our mission, strike fast, destroy the base, and capture prisoners. Sokolov Battalion lead the assault. Flanks will be covered by adjacent units. At 1200, artillery will hit the slopes to cut off escape routes. Operation Gyrza, simple and effective. Sokolov frowned. He had fought too long in these mountains to believe in simple and effective. Is the intel confirmed? He asked, voice heavy. Yes, Ruzakov said quickly. This gorge is too perfect for an ambush, Sokolov warned. If they're waiting, we'll be trapped in a stone coffin. There'll be artillery, Ruzakov replied with a smug smile. No need for air support. HQ data is solid. And success here, he added meaningfully, will open doors for everyone. Ivan, standing behind the commander, felt a wave of disgust. Climber, he thought. Careerist. Sokolov stared long at the map, then looked Ruzakov dead in the eye. Fine, Captain. Orders are orders. But if your artillery is 5 minutes late, there'll be no one left to file reports about career prospects. They entered the gorge under cover of night. The silence was unnatural. No cicadas. No distant dog howls. Just dead, crushing quiet. Sokolov walked point with Ivan, stopping every few steps to listen. I don't like this, Petrovich, he whispered. Feels like a grave. He was right. With less than a kilometer to the supposed base, the mountains lit up. Tracer fire tore the darkness. Grenades rained from the cliffs. The lead BMP exploded in flames. Chaos erupted. Defensive circle. Hold the line. Sokolov shouted over the gunfire. Radio, get me HQ. Ivan, firing from behind a rock, watched as the radio operator frantically turned knobs. Falcon calling Dawn. Falcon calling Dawn were in an ambush. Request fire on both slopes. Immediate support needed. Over. Finally, through the static came Ruzakov's shaken voice. Dawn here. Falcon. Report situation, confirm coordinates. Coordinates. Sokolov bellowed, grabbing the handset. Ruzakov, it's me. They were waiting for us. Hit them now. Silence. A deadly pause. Then came the coward's answer. Alexei Igorevich. I can't. HQ on approved fire. Your troops are too close. Risk a friendly fire. You must retreat to a safe distance. Sokolov's face contorted. He understood everything. Retreat? Retreat where, you coward? We're surrounded. We have wounded. My orders are to hold position until further assessment. Ryzhikov answered, cold, bureaucratic. Then click. Static. They'd been abandoned. Ryzhikov was too scared to risk a mistake. Too scared of his career falling apart. Easier to sacrifice a whole battalion. Sokolov tossed the radio aside. His face was ash-gray, not from dust, but fury. He looked at Ivan and the small group of surviving soldiers huddled behind rocks. No help's coming, he said. We break out on our own. For the motherland. For those who won't rise again. Those were his last words. A burst of machine gun fire tore through his chest. He collapsed into Ivan's arms, whispering with his last breath, "Get the boys out." Ivan, wounded in shoulder and leg, remembered only fragments after that. Rage replacing fear. Screams of the wounded. Last bullet in the magazine. Then darkness. He woke 2 days later in a hospital ward. The first thing he saw wasn't a doctor. It was Captain Ryzhikov, standing by the door, quietly speaking to a colonel from HQ. Ryzhikov didn't know Ivan was awake. "A tragic mistake, Comrade Colonel," he was saying smoothly. Lieutenant Colonel Sokolov acted recklessly, altered the route on his own, entered an unverified gorge without HQ confirmation. I tried to stop him via radio, but he refused to listen. His stubbornness and underestimation of the enemy cost us dearly. I was barely able to organize the survivors' retreat. Ivan listened, blood boiling with helpless rage. That coward, who left him to die, was now building his career on their bones, blaming a fallen hero who couldn't defend himself. Ivan tried to rise to speak, but only a faint groan came out. Ryzhikov turned, their eyes met. Ivan saw no shame, no guilt, only cold, predatory fear of being exposed, and steely resolve to protect his lie. In that moment, Ivan Gordaev swore to himself. He would live. Whatever it took, he would survive. And one day, the truth would come out about Sokolov's courage and Ryzhikov's betrayal, even if it took his whole life. A direct violation of orders, with all the consequences that come with it. I hope we understand each other. With that, she stood up, turned sharply in a way only a trained officer could, and left the office without another word. The corridors of the administration building, once so familiar and welcoming, now felt cold and hostile. Colleagues averted their eyes. The system she had served loyally, with all her heart, had just spat her out like used garbage. It seemed like total defeat. The hunters had fallen into their own trap. The journalist had been silenced. The witness eliminated. The evidence destroyed. Ivan Gordaev, the key accuser, was now sitting in a detention cell, framed for a crime he didn't commit. There was no way he'd come out clean. And the only ally he had left in uniform, Major Anna Smirnova, had just been suspended and now faced the tribunal herself. General Ryzhikov could celebrate. He had cleaned up all loose ends, shut every mouth. He was untouchable again. That evening, Anna sat alone in her kitchen, no longer in uniform. Her military jacket hung in the wardrobe, and she had no idea if she'd ever wear it again. Her mind was blank, empty. It was over. Everything was lost. She had endangered good people, trusted an old veteran, stood up to the system, and had been crushed. The bitter taste of failure and helplessness choked her. She walked to the window and looked out at the night city. What now? To give up? Forget everything? Let a corrupt general continue desecrating the honor and memory of fallen soldiers? No, she couldn't do that, even if it cost her everything. And just then, in that darkest hour of despair, something surfaced in her mind. A snippet of conversation she'd overheard in the corridor 2 days earlier. 2 senior officers had been discussing an upcoming unofficial meeting, a weekend retreat in a Ministry of Defense resort called Zvezda. They had mentioned that Ryzhikov would be there. And more importantly, a VIP from Moscow was flying in, a deputy chief from the main directorate, tasked with reviewing personnel matters. At the time, Anna hadn't paid attention. Now it was her last chance, her last bullet, a place where Ruzakov would feel safe, surrounded by his people, confident in his victory, relaxed, and that VIP from Moscow, still untouched by local corruption, might just be open to hearing the truth. It was a desperate gamble. If her involvement was discovered, it wouldn't just be suspension. It would mean a court-martial and prison. But the choice was simple. Risk everything for a sliver of justice, or live the rest of her life with the shame of cowardice. Anna pulled out an old button phone from a drawer, one she hadn't used in years. She couldn't call any of Ivan's old comrades directly. Their phones were surely being monitored. But she remembered something. That paratrooper veteran who'd been pushed away at the club earlier, he had a daughter, a nurse at the same hospital where Kovalyov had been treated. Anna called city directory assistants, got the number, dialed. "Hello." A young woman answered. "Sorry for the late call," Anna said, "but I need you to pass a message to your father. It's urgent. He'll know who it's for, Ivan Petrovich." She waited for the girl to grab a pen, then spoke clearly and slowly. "Resort Zvezda, Friday, 6 p.m. banquet hall. A guest from Moscow will be present. This is the last bullet." She hung up, removed the SIM card, snapped it in half, and broke the phone. She had done all she could. Now it was up to the old man, sitting in his cell. Would he use this final bullet, or was the trap already sealed? Ivan Petrovich Gordaev walked steadily down the long hallway of the Zvezda resort. His steps were heavy, but his eyes burned with unshakable fire. Behind him, several trusted veterans, old soldiers, ready to stand with their commander once more. Ahead, a private meeting. General Ruzakov, surrounded by his inner circle, and a high-ranking guest from Moscow. Ivan remembered every betrayal, every lie, every face. This was a final stand. For honor, for truth, for the memory of Lieutenant Colonel Alexei Sokolov. "Are you sure, Petrovich?" asked Voronov, the grizzled paratrooper beside him. "If they spot us, we won't just be thrown out." "We're not here to visit," Ivan replied calmly. "We're here to open the eyes of those who've forgotten what true service to the motherland means. And if we're asked to leave, we'll leave last." They entered the hall like shadows, quiet, but unmistakably present. Surprised murmurs rippled through the room. Senior officers looked stunned. At the head of the table, Ruzakov. The moment he saw Gordaev, his face paled ever so slightly. He knew this was no longer a meeting. The rules had changed. Ivan stepped forward. The silence was suffocating. "General," he said loudly and clearly, "you know I don't waste words. I didn't come here to pay respects. I came to say out loud what you've tried so hard to bury.